What is up? It's me, Rook Thomas, everyone's favorite 1960s film enjoyer. In the year 1960, lots of big things happened worldwide. John F. Kennedy ran for president, the Summer Olympics were held in Rome, and the Beatles held their very first ever performance. But today, that's not really what I want to talk about. I'm looking a little bit closer at two films that were released in 1960. The first one is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, and the second is René Clément's Purple Noon. And beyond both coming out in 1960, these two films have something else in common that I really want to talk about today. I want you to take a look at these two actors. On the left, we have Anthony Perkins, who starred as Norman Bates in Psycho, and on the right is Alain Delon, who starred as Tom Ripley in Purple Noon. Do you see anything common between them? And more importantly, do you find them attractive? Even if you, dear viewer, do not, most of the letterbox reviews for these two movies prove that a significant portion of the audience does. As I was watching these films, I began to notice that the casting of these actors really changed how I interacted with the story. And this led me to the main question that I want to conquer today. Why are we more likely to excuse or ignore the bad actions of a character when they're hot? Now, to delve deeper into this, we're going to need to spoil some of the twists in these movies, so if you haven't seen them before, I highly suggest that you go watch them. So pause the video, go find them, spend about 3 hours of your life watching peak filmmaking, and then come back and finish the video. But be sure to come back. All ready? Let's go. But one quick aside before we get into the meat of this video, I'm going to be referring to Norman Bates' character exclusively as Norman and use singular he/him pronouns. This is for the sake of simplicity. I understand that Norman and Mother and their multiple personality disorder are subjects that are complex and really need to be handled with care. Also, in this video, when I refer to villains, I'm exclusively talking about the antagonists of the story, and when I say that they've done something evil or bad, it's just because it falls outside of what is socially acceptable in society. This video is not to claim that any real-life people with the same mental disorders as these characters are inherently evil or anything like that. It's just meant to be a discussion about how we as an audience relate to characters on screen and what sort of aspects and attributes affect that. Let's get into it. Norman Bates and Tom Ripley have a few commonalities that make them the perfect candidates for this discussion. The obvious prerequisite to a conversation about hot villains is that they're hot. Both of them are considered physically attractive by a large portion of the audience, so they qualify. They also need to be villains to count. Both of them kill at least 2 people over the course of the film, with Norman clocking in a few more before the film's time frame begins. Tom, on the other hand, doesn't kill anyone else in the film, but he makes up for this deficit with his theft, manipulation, and identity fraud. Now we come to what I believe is one of the most important factors of commonality between them that makes them perfect for this discussion. They're both the main characters of their films. Tom is, of course, the main character of Purple Noon because the film follows his escapades. For Norman, he's not the main character for the whole of the film, but after Marion's death, he assumes this position until Marion's sister and Marion's boyfriend become more prominent characters. So what makes them so compelling? I can say from my personal experience watching these films that I was rooting for Tom and Norman to be safe and succeed, even when I knew what bad they had done. In the scene where Norman is cleaning up Marion's body, the camera stays centered around the stack of money that she stole, and the entire time I was begging for Norman to just find it and take it so he could get out of there and away from the body he was cleaning up. And for Purple Noon, I spent the last 20 minutes of the film wishing that Tom would just leave Europe. I knew the multitude of crimes he had committed, but for some reason I wanted him to get away with it. I really began looking into the concept after I found out that the book that Psycho is based off of has Norman be a much older and generally less attractive character. My immediate thought upon hearing this was that that would completely change the dynamic of the film. It made me realize that Perkinson's casting was intentional, a way for the audience to be more sympathetic towards Norman's character. And when I saw the same thing happen in Purple Noon, I knew I had to look into it. do we hold more sympathy for attractive people? I found a report of a study from June 2011 that looked into whether or not people are more likely to forgive attractive people versus unattractive people. In their article titled, "Is Beauty a Gift or a Curse? The Influence of an Offender's Physical Attractiveness on Forgiveness," April E. Phillips and Cassandra Hranek described 2 studies that sought to discover if the attractiveness of a transgressor affected the likelihood of them being forgiven. The study took 55 women and 36 men ages 18 to 54 and showed them a hypothetical scenario where they were offended. In some scenarios, the offender gave an apology, in others they did not. The scenarios were accompanied by a photo of either an attractive woman or a less attractive woman. These 3 independent variables, attractiveness of the offender, gender of the participant, and whether there was an apology, were all tested in the first study. In the second study, 31 women and 24 men, ages 18 to 51, were given a similar test, but every scenario contained an apology that was pre-recorded. Therefore, the only independent variables were the attractiveness of the offender and the gender of the participant. The participants were then asked to rate the quality of the apology and the perceived level of interest in dating the offender, in addition to whether or not they would forgive them. Between these 2 studies, we have some interesting data. Here's a graph that shows the female participants' responses to the first study. And here's a graph that shows the male participants' responses. As you can see, the male participants were more likely to forgive the attractive woman who apologized over the less attractive woman who apologized as well. On the reverse side, female participants were more likely to forgive the less attractive woman who apologized. The likelihood of forgiveness when no apology was given was pretty even, whether the offender was attractive or not. As for study 2, this table shows us that male participants rated the attractive offender's apology as higher in quality than the less attractive offender, with female participants showing the exact opposite. The article concludes that this is because a male victim, who may want to pursue a relationship with her in the future, can preserve this possibility if he is willing to offer forgiveness in some circumstances, whereas a female victim, who perceives the offender to be a potential rival, might be less likely to offer forgiveness. It is logical to conclude that these effects are being driven by the fact that the attractive female offender is higher in overall mate value than the less attractive female offender. While I believe that trying to base this in some sort of biological drive may be a simplification of the larger societal problem in the way that different genders and sexes interact, I do believe that this study and the idea that forgiveness might be a way to leave open the opportunity for a relationship is an interesting way to contextualize the dynamic between the audience and the characters on screen. If a person is more likely to forgive someone that they're interested in having a relationship with, then the main character of the film is the perfect place to do that. As a viewer of a film, you want to understand the character that you spend the most time with, and the one that you're the most invested in. And Tom and Norman have the benefit of being shrouded in mystery. We want to know them better, so we're willing to leave ourselves open to that possibility even as we watch them commit crimes. But if this were it, then that would be true of every main character, and not just the attractive ones. The physical attractiveness of a character must add something to the equation that makes the audience want to understand them more. My suggestion is that there's a scale of sorts of how much we're willing to forgive, or at least ignore, of a character's actions, and that the physical attractiveness of that character adds a significant amount of points in the forgiveness direction. So if you had 2 equally interesting and compelling situations for a character to thrive in, then their physical attractiveness would be able to tip the scale, so to speak. Or perhaps it's because the situation and the characters aren't real at all. We find it so much easier to objectify a character on the screen because they're just fictional. They only exist in our minds so they can act however we want them to. If we view a character as an object to possess, then it's so much easier to just ignore all of the things we don't like about them, as long as we can imagine getting what we want. This is an important divide between the forgiveness of real people, like we saw in the study, and that of fictional characters. What someone might be willing to excuse in fiction might not be something that they accept in real life. There are many more reasons I could think of why we're willing to excuse and ignore the actions of characters like Norman Bates and Tom Ripley, but I've gone on enough tangents for this video. I would love, however, to hear your theories in the comments. Do you think that certain characters benefit from pretty privilege when it comes to the audience ignoring their actions? Do you think it's just because it's all fictional? Or do you have another idea, like how we tend to reflect ourselves onto the main character of a story? Let me know below, but be sure to follow the rules for respectful discussion. Thank you so much for joining me while I explored this topic. I am a huge nerd, so I had a lot of fun researching this area of psychology and learning more about how we relate to each other as people. And my nerdery won't stop, as I plan to use this channel to discuss films, try new projects, and to do video essays on whatever my brain has decided to latch itself onto. If any of that sounds interesting to you, feel free to subscribe or leave a little like. Thank you again so much for joining me, and this is Rook Thomas signing off until next time. Bye-bye!